What comes to your mind when you think of war? Is it something beautiful, glorious and gigantic, like Edward the Tie's Long Live the Emperor? Is it the courage of advancing soldiers? Is it the tension or excitement of aiming, stabbing and shooting? Is it the desire of looting enemy properties? Or is it rather something obnoxious and gloomy, hidden in the depths of our heart that we try all our best to ignore and avoid? Is it the weeping mothers who have lost their children forever? Is it, as shown here in this picture, arbitrary murder of the so-called enemies, whether they are soldiers or civilians? Is it the total surrender of our moral conscience when we, like a well-uniformed invading soldier, appreciate our masterpiece of killing without the slightest remorse or sorrow? Here we approach a piece of art by Francisco Goya, which contains realistic ugliness, traumatic disharmony and abject tragedy. The title Goya gave to the drawing at the bottom is One Cannot Tell Why, not in this case either. What did the victims do to cause their untimely deaths? Who were they fighting for? Where and when did this happen? We simply don't know. These works, together with 3 others that we can see in the same room of the gallery, form part of Goya's Disasters of War series. Have a look at the etchings. What first catches our attention may be the impression that they are miserable and their colours seem to be monotonous. Now come closer and examine the bottom one. Are you weary of the tension? Are you agonized with the scene of strangulation? Are you questioning why the reclining soldier remained so calm and so emotionally distanced, though it was him who had just played an active part in the execution? What hatred he had that transformed him into such a cold-blooded devil? The lifeless tree trunks and the deserted landscape seemed to accuse in vain the French invaders' atrocities. So basically, what happened? Goya created this series in the early 19th century when Spain was invaded by France under Napoleon Bonaparte. As this Peninsular War progressed, we can witness with Goya the tortures, pillages, rapes, dislocations and casualties it inflicted. We may readily scream for help when observing the act of torture unfold, like the image at the top. We may struggle to inhale the air like the clergymen who are being strangled at the garrote as the middle picture. But here, though the dirty work is already done, we don't feel any sense of relief. The cruelty doesn't just end when the heart stops beating. In fact, our own dignity, like the dignity of the hapless man in the middle of the foreground, was trampled. His pants were stripped down below his knees. Was it because his belt was used as a rope to hang him? Or even worse, was he castrated as part of the torture? The arrogantly unmoved invader seems to dare us to see for ourselves and to even praise his gallant cowardice, gallant that he had claimed additional lives for the glory of France, cowardly for the excessive and disproportionate cruelty the victims endured. In the background, we can barely notice 2 other people who were hanged. Did they undergo the same ordeal? Unlike the 3 crosses which crucified Jesus Christ and the thieves at Golgotha, here there is absolutely no hope for salvation. Imagine that we zoom out of this picture according to its triangular composition and make the crime scene infinite, timeless and universal. We may realize with deep horror that dozens, hundreds, tens of thousands were hanged in the same way in the Spanish wilderness, being left to rot and to be forgotten in their time, up till now, and way into the future. Urged by our last glimmer of sympathy, we might try to lower these corpses and bury them with respect. But watch out! The exasperated French roars at us like Cerberus of hell in Greek mythology. He exclaims, "Stop! Unless you too want to be killed and be enslaved in my realm of darkness." But was the Frenchman the only one here that was morally detached from the crime? Keep this in mind for the moment. Let's take a step back from the details and look at how did Goya achieve such an overwhelming style. First of all, there seems to be no continuous curves in the image. Rather, we see rough and sometimes disorderly lines. There's no area of smoothness, and no gap for reconciliation or contest between the various sections of the image to allow us to catch our breath. For example, the bush immediately behind the hanged man at the front appears to be abrupt. There is a lack of diversity of colors that should have presented the effects of light and shade, and a sense of distance between this bush and the ones further afield. All we can see here, in terms of the plantations, are large blocks of colors. The roughness of the drawing can also be seen in the ropes, the fabrics of the victims' clothes, and their hair, emphasizing the mess of their appearance at the tragic final moment of their lives. Next, the structures of the bodies are not natural. In this picture, we see all 4 human figures being stiff, as if frozen in time and totally numb. The lifeless victims may have just given up their final struggle for life a few minutes ago, while we can feel the evil intention of the Frenchman through his indifference. Right here we are catching him in his very act of arrogant and rational observation of a disaster which should have evoked strong emotions. Is this really rationality, or rather irrationality and barbarity? Apart from the lines and the structures, the production process for these artworks also helps dramatize the scene. Etching requires the artist to transfer a finished drawing from paper onto a copper plate with an acid-resistant material. Then the copper plate would be placed in a container with acid. The artist needs to be watchful of the duration of this acidic bath so that the erosion of the copper plate is neither too little to make the final product lack of contrast between deep and shallow lines, nor too much to ruin the work. After cleaning, the engraved copper plate could then be pressed onto a piece of paper, or many pieces, like a stamp and a photocopier. Then we have the final image on the paper. Because this technique presents a poverty of colors, it intensifies the struggles between paleness and darkness, the lesser evil and the greater evil, the hopeless and the absolute hell, like a black and white tragic film. In fact, Goya enjoyed this technique so much that he kept using it for decades, even though he received almost no income from etchings, but had to make a living by painting more traditional works that are pleasing to the eyes. Now you may ask me, why do we have to go through these sufferings with the victims? Remember what I asked you earlier? Is the French soldier the only one who is morally detached from this crime? No. Goya detached himself as well. Like a war photographer of our age, Goya presented us a cruel but real documentary, an accusation against the Peninsular War and all wars in history, without pointing at us and telling us what moral lessons we should learn. He created this series not to make his viewers feel pleasant. The ugliness and the revolutionary methods we discussed should not only cause our disgust, but also provoke our thoughts and reflections. Is there a meaningful debate here between the magnificent elevation of war by Edward de Tailles' oil painting Long Live the Emperor, and the seemingly unimportant subjugation of morality by Goya's etchings? Has humankind really improved and become civilized and ethical? Or are we all in this hell on earth together? We can equally be the victims and the perpetrators, for who can guarantee us that once we seize power, we would not be as corrupt as this invader? Should wars continue to be glorified? Should people who gained victory by criminal means continue to be commemorated? Are these sufferings caused by our own sins? By saying, "I can't tell why," Goya left all of these for us as open questions, and we are the ones to figure them out, so that hopefully the disasters of war will not repeat itself for too many times. Or maybe it's just hope, an illusion, and history is doomed to repeat itself both in art and in our real life.